Hello, I'm Doug Van Pelt, self-appointed attorney for Joel Osteen. Tonight, on the Heaven's Metal Show, the Heaven's Metal video podcast, Joel Osteen is on trial. The views expressed in this podcast in no way are endorsed by or reflect the views of Joel Osteen and or Lakewood Church. Welcome to the Heaven's Metal podcast. As I said, I am the self-appointed attorney for Joel Osteen. The last time I appointed myself as an attorney was back in the 90s in a magazine article for HM Magazine. The title of the article was Galactic Cowboys on Trial. You know, as a writer and editor, I got fed up with people criticizing the Galactic Cowboys, the members of this band, these musicians, these artists, degrading them, discussing them in public forums and letters to the editor and on online message boards, bulletin boards back in the late 90s. And these people, I kind of got fed up with them judging somebody they didn't even know as if they knew them and as if they had a right to judge them. And the things they supposed and presumed, the assumptions they made. So tonight, today, this morning, even in Australia, it's mid-afternoon. We're going to talk about Joel Osteen. Now, the first witness we're going to bring up is a high school jock. Well, he was a high school jock. Now he's an overaged, balding man who's got something to say. Joel Osteen. I'll tell you what I think. That guy's a preacher. He should be giving all of his money away. No preacher should be rich. That witness I'd like to refer to as an armchair quarterback. They sit back, not doing anything really, judging somebody they don't even know, acting as if they could really talk about the situation that they're talking about. They're putting somebody down. It's like you know, an armchair quarterback. Oh, I wouldn't have thrown that pass. I would have held that ball for the field goal attempt. I wouldn't have dropped that slippery ball out of my hands. It would have been good because I'm here and I'm saying it like it's so. Let's look at what that witness had to say. He said that preachers should give all their money away. It's an interesting concept. It makes sense on the surface. But doesn't the Bible say that a worker is worthy of his wages? You know, so let me ask you, armchair quarterback, how much money should a pastor make? How much should a preacher make? What should his salary be? Should he get anything at all for doing what he does? I gave you the 3 head tilts. That's attorney body language for, man, that's just ridiculous. Joel Osteen, he's just one of those make-you-feel-good preachers feeding people lies. One of my favorite bands puts it best. You can be anything that you want. Just dream about it. Just speak it forth. Next joke. Our next witness is a heavy metal fan. You know, when I was editing a heavy metal magazine, I came across a distinct personality type. It was, we could just call them the 20-somethings. The 20-something Christians oftentimes find self-esteem and worth based on how much they know and how good they are at pointing out errors in other people. Think about how good of an attitude that is for having relationships. But I found that a lot. You know, what's funny is that I'm gonna pick on Calvinists. You know, I think Calvinists are great people. And but one of the funny things is when you get a 20-something-year-old male, got lots of testosterone, and he picks up on the truth of Calvinism. Boy, that's all he wants to do. Let's talk about Calvinism and show the error of of the ways of people who don't line up with TULIP, the 5 points of Calvinism. What else can we talk about this witness? Heavy metal fan. He accused Joel Osteen of lying to people and feeding them fluff, filling up their head with their dreams, and their dreams can all come true. You know, a few years ago, somebody told me that they needed a ride to Houston. They wanted to go to Joel Osteen's church, and they gave me a CD. It was like it was in a DVD Emery case, and it had like 4 or 5 discs in it. Tons of his sermons. And, you know, like a lot of my 20-something friends, I didn't really want to listen to these, but gave it a shot, you know. Got an open mind. I've heard some criticism about this man. I've heard people snicker and associate him with the Jimmy Swaggarts and the Kenneth Copelands, Kenneth Hagins, the Paul Crouches, and Jim Bakers of the world. So I checked out his sermons. You know what I heard? I heard Joel Osteen talk about suffering. I heard him preach about Joseph and the struggles he went through, his brothers throwing him in a pit, being falsely accused of rape, being thrown into prison, finding a good avenue out of prison, and the joker that he helped out broke his promise and didn't help him get out. And Joseph endured hardship and suffering. I've heard Joel preach about Joseph quite a bit. And I don't know if I've heard many preachers preach on the book of Job and preach on Job as much as I've heard Joel Osteen. So I have not heard Joel Osteen shy away from sin. I've heard some of his sermons. That's what I'm basing my evidence on, my argument. So as I've listened to the evidence, I've heard Joel Osteen preach a lot. I've heard him deal with reality, with disappointment, with struggle, with suffering, with death. You know, it doesn't sound like a feel-good preacher to me. Hitting the bong a little bit. I read in the newspaper that there was a hurricane in Texas, and the city came to Joel Osteen and said, "Let us put some people in your building. You got a big building, you ain't using it." And he turned them away. Probably just laughed at him, just on his way to the bank. So this last witness, I think he's high on drugs on the stand, which should be illegal in a court of law. Boy, if this were a real court, where that dude would be sitting behind bars right now. That was a vacuum cleaner anyway. The guy's out of his mind. So, he heard a newspaper, a media report, where the Osteens were questioned about housing and putting people up during the hurricane. You know, there's 3 sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth. And a lot of times, these stories that come out, and do you think the news media is fair to the religious right, to preachers, to evangelists, to TV preachers? Do you think the media kind of enjoys and relishes the idea of higher ratings? It's a juicy story when a righteous person falls or is guilty of doing something stupid. Anyway, I would advise you to look to the facts, sir, and find out what really happened there. Find out the facts. You know, people sometimes say, "Judge not lest ye be judged." Jesus did say that. But the context of his saying was, when you judge, judge righteously, because you're going to be judged with the same strictness, the same standard that you judge others. So if you're going to judge somebody, if you're going to accuse them of something serious, judge fairly. Judge with an open mind. Look at the facts. Look at both sides of the story. Have you ever looked and given Joel Osteen a shot? Or do you just dismiss him? Do you dogpile on the popular accusation, you know, that TV preachers are all losers? So what is the lesson? What is the lesson from the Galactic Cowboys on Trial article that came out in HM Magazine back in the 90s, back in the last century? Well, one of them was, be careful when you judge. You know, if somebody's doing God's work and you're judging them falsely, you are a big problem. If you're judging them accurately, if somebody needs to come down, if somebody's caught in something wrong, you know, they're going to pay. It's interesting. There's a story in the Bible where Jesus was walking with his disciples, and there was probably parakeets nearby chirping and warping and making lots of noise. But they were talking to Jesus about these other people that were kind of spreading the message, but they weren't part of their gang. They weren't part of their disciples. They weren't part of their club. And you know what Jesus told them? He said, leave them alone. If you go into the wheat and try to get the tares out, tares are like weeds. If you try to extract the weeds from the wheat while they're both growing, you're going to damage some wheat in the process. Wait until the harvest comes. Jesus is basically saying, wait till Judgment Day. Let God deal with false teachers or people with bad motives. Let God sort it out. Because if you don't, if you go in there and try to sort it out now, you're going to damage some good people. You're going to damage some good wheat. So, I rest my case. There's a discussion here. You make your points known. And we'll hear from the judge.